The rain pelted against the windows of the small coffee shop on Madison Street, where Marcus King first saw Catherine Williams. Everyone called him King because of his last name and his commanding presence in the boardroom. He was 35, successful, and had built his real estate empire from nothing. But that morning in October, he looked like any other man seeking shelter from the unexpected downpour. Catherine was behind the counter, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, steam from the espresso machine creating a soft halo around her face. She moved with practiced grace, preparing orders while chatting with regular customers. Marcus watched her for a moment before approaching the counter, struck by how she seemed to brighten the dreary morning. "What can I get you?" she asked, her green eyes meeting his. There was something in that moment, a spark that neither could explain. Marcus, usually confident and articulate, stumbled over his order. "Just coffee. Black, please," he managed, feeling oddly nervous. As she poured his coffee, their fingers brushed when she handed him the cup. The touch was brief but electric. Catherine felt it too, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the steam from the coffee machines. Marcus became a regular after that day. Every morning at 7:30 sharp, he would walk through the door. Catherine would already have his black coffee ready, and they would exchange a few words that gradually grew into conversations. She learned he had grown up poor, raised by a single mother who cleaned offices at night. He learned she was working 2 jobs to pay for her younger brother's college tuition while pursuing her dream of opening an art gallery. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Marcus finally asked her to dinner. Catherine hesitated. She had seen the expensive suits, the luxury car he drove. Their worlds seemed impossibly different. But something in his eyes, a vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, made her say yes. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant Marcus remembered from his childhood. He wanted to show her the real him, not the successful businessman everyone else saw. Over plates of simple pasta and glasses of house wine, they talked for hours. Catherine spoke about her love for art, how she could lose herself for hours in a museum. Marcus admitted he knew nothing about art, but loved how passionate she became when discussing it. "Teach me," he said simply. "Show me what you see." The next weekend, Catherine took him to the City Museum. She guided him through the galleries, explaining the emotions behind each piece, the stories the artists were trying to tell. Marcus found himself captivated, not just by the art, but by how Catherine saw the world. She found beauty in things he had walked past 1,000 times without noticing. Their relationship bloomed through the fall and into winter. Marcus would leave board meetings early to surprise Catherine at the coffee shop. She would text him pictures of interesting buildings she passed, knowing his love for architecture. He introduced her to the opera. She introduced him to indie concerts in underground venues. They were from different worlds, but somehow they made sense together. Marcus's friends and business associates were skeptical. At corporate dinners, Catherine stood out, not because she didn't belong, but because she was genuine in a room full of people playing roles. She spoke her mind, laughed freely, and wasn't impressed by wealth or status. Some found it refreshing. Others whispered that King was having a midlife crisis. Catherine faced her own challenges. Her co-workers at the coffee shop teased her about dating a rich guy, while her artist friends accused her of selling out. Her younger brother, David, worried she would get hurt. "Guys like that don't end up with girls like us," he warned. But Catherine and Marcus were too caught up in each other to care about outside opinions. On New Year's Eve, standing on Marcus's apartment balcony overlooking the city, he told her he loved her. The fireworks exploding in the sky seemed to pale compared to the light in Catherine's eyes when she said it back. Winter turned to spring, and their love deepened. Marcus started leaving work at reasonable hours, something his assistant had never seen before. Catherine's artwork became inspired by their relationship, filled with warm colors and hopeful themes. She painted a portrait of Marcus, capturing not the businessman but the man who sang off-key in the shower and couldn't figure out how to use her French press. Marcus began to envision a future with Catherine. He found himself looking at engagement rings, imagining her reaction. He wanted to give her everything, not just material things, but support for her dreams. He started researching locations for her gallery, making calls to his connections in the art world. Their love seemed invincible, like nothing could touch them as long as they were together. Marcus felt like a king with Catherine by his side, not because of his success or wealth, but because she made him feel truly seen and loved for who he was beneath it all. Catherine had never felt more alive, more herself, than when she was with Marcus. He encouraged her ambitions and made her believe anything was possible. Those early days were golden, filled with discovery and joy. They were building something beautiful together, a bridge between two worlds that shouldn't have connected but somehow did perfectly. Neither could have imagined how quickly golden days could turn gray, how love that seemed so strong could begin to crack under pressures neither saw coming. But in those first months, they were simply Marcus and Catherine, two people who found each other in a coffee shop on a rainy morning and decided to take a chance on love. They were happy, hopeful, and believed that together they could overcome anything the world threw at them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first major crack appeared 6 months into their relationship. Marcus had been working on the biggest deal of his career, a waterfront development that would transform the old industrial district into luxury condos and high-end retail spaces. The pressure was immense, with investors breathing down his neck and competitors trying to sabotage the project. Catherine noticed the change immediately. Marcus's easy smile became forced, his phone constantly buzzing during their dinners. He would apologize, promising things would calm down after the deal closed. But the calls kept coming. Late-night meetings became routine, and their weekend gallery visits disappeared entirely. The coffee shop where they met became a symbol of their growing distance. Marcus's morning visits became sporadic, then stopped altogether. His assistant picked up his coffee instead, always in a rush, barely making eye contact with Catherine. She tried to be understanding, reminding herself that this was temporary, that the man she loved was still there beneath the stress. One evening, Marcus canceled their dinner plans for the 3rd time that week. Catherine found herself alone in her small apartment, staring at a canvas she couldn't seem to fill. Her art had always been her outlet, but lately the colors seemed dull, the inspiration gone. She called her friend Sarah, who listened patiently before saying what Catherine didn't want to hear. "You're losing yourself in this relationship," Sarah said gently. "When was the last time you painted something you were proud of? When did you last work on your gallery plans?" Catherine realized with a shock that she had put her dreams on hold, waiting for Marcus to have time for her again. She had become a supporting character in his life story, forgetting she had her own story to write. The next morning, she confronted Marcus at his office. His assistant tried to stop her, but Catherine pushed past, finding Marcus in a conference room surrounded by lawyers and blueprints. He looked up, surprised and slightly annoyed at the interruption. "We need to talk," Catherine said firmly. Marcus excused himself, leading her to his private office. Before she could speak, he launched into an explanation about the deal, the pressure, how everything would be better in just a few more weeks. Catherine listened, watching the man she loved disappear behind corporate speak and excuses. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said quietly when he finished. "You've become everything you said you never wanted to be." The words stung because they were true. Marcus had gotten so caught up in proving himself, in building his empire, that he had forgotten why he was building it in the first place. He wanted to provide for Catherine, to give her the world, but in doing so he had stopped giving her himself. They agreed to try harder, to make more time for each other. For a few weeks, things improved. Marcus delegated more responsibilities, and they resumed their gallery visits. Catherine started painting again, working on pieces for her future gallery. But the improvement was temporary. The real storm came when Marcus's mother, Elena, arrived for a visit. She had never met Catherine, and Marcus was nervous about the introduction. Elena King was a proud woman who had sacrificed everything for her son's education and success. She had specific ideas about the kind of woman her son should marry, someone from their community who understood their struggles and shared their values. The dinner was a disaster. Elena was polite but cold, asking pointed questions about Catherine's family, her education, her career plans. When Catherine mentioned her art gallery dreams, Elena's expression made it clear what she thought of such impractical ambitions. Marcus sat silent, torn between defending Catherine and not wanting to upset his mother. After Elena left, the argument that had been building for months finally exploded. Catherine accused Marcus of being ashamed of her, of trying to mold her into someone more acceptable to his world. Marcus fired back that she didn't understand the pressure he was under, the expectations that came with success. "You think I care about your money?" Catherine shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I fell in love with the man who shared his childhood stories over cheap wine. Where is he?" "He grew up," Marcus snapped back. "He realized that love doesn't pay bills or build futures. I'm doing this for us." "No, you're doing this for you, for your ego, for everyone except us." They didn't speak for 3 days. When they finally reconciled, both apologizing, something had shifted. The easy comfort they once shared was replaced with careful politeness. They were trying too hard, both aware that something precious was slipping away but unable to stop it. Marcus threw himself even deeper into work, closing the waterfront deal but immediately moving on to the next project. Catherine spent more time with her artist friends, finding solace in their bohemian world that felt more authentic than the corporate galas Marcus increasingly insisted she attend. At one such gala, Catherine overheard 2 of Marcus's colleagues discussing her. "King's little art project," one called her. "Give it another few months. He'll realize he needs someone who understands this world." The words cut deep. Not because they were cruel, but because she saw Marcus laughing with them minutes later, making no effort to defend her. She left the party early, walking home alone in her evening gown, feeling like a stranger in her own life. Marcus didn't notice she had left until an hour later. When he arrived at her apartment, she was packing canvases into boxes. "What are you doing?" he asked, panic in his voice. "I got offered a residency in Portland, 3 months at an artist colony. I'm going to take it." The argument that followed was their worst yet. Marcus accused her of running away, of giving up on them. Catherine accused him of already having given up, of choosing his ambition over their love. Both were right and both were wrong, but neither could see past their own hurt. Catherine left for Portland the next week. They agreed to use the time apart to think, to figure out what they really wanted. Marcus promised to visit, but business always seemed to interfere. Their phone calls became shorter, the silences longer. Catherine's art flourished in Portland, surrounded by people who understood her passion. Marcus's empire continued to grow, but his penthouse felt emptier each night. 2 months into her residency, Catherine got the call that changed everything. A prestigious gallery in Portland wanted to showcase her work. It was the opportunity she had dreamed of, but it meant staying in Portland, building her career there. She called Marcus, hoping he would be happy for her, that maybe he would even consider moving. "That's great," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "But what about us? What about your plans here?" "They were my plans," Catherine said softly. "But somewhere along the way, they became your plans for me. This is what I want, Marcus. This is who I am." The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they couldn't say. Both knew they were at a crossroads, that the next word spoken would determine everything. Marcus wanted to tell her he would move mountains to be with her, but the words wouldn't come. His life, his identity, everything he had built, was in New York. Catherine waited, hoping he would choose her, choose them, but knowing in her heart what his silence meant. Catherine extended her residency in Portland. 1 month turned into 2, then 3. The gallery show was a massive success, with several pieces selling on opening night. Local art critics praised her work's emotional depth and raw honesty. She was finally becoming the artist she had always dreamed of being, but the victory felt hollow without Marcus to share it. Marcus followed her success from New York, reading the reviews online, staring at photos from the gallery opening. In one, Catherine stood beside her largest piece, the portrait of him she had painted in their early days together. But now it hung in a gallery 3,000 miles away. Like their love itself, beautiful but distant. He tried to convince himself he was happy for her. He sent flowers for the opening, a congratulatory text that felt inadequate. But late at night, alone in his penthouse, he admitted the truth. He was angry. Angry that she had chosen art over him. Angry that she seemed to be thriving without him. Angry most of all at himself for letting it happen. The waterfront development was completed, a glittering monument to Marcus's success. The opening ceremony was covered by every major publication, his photo on the business section's front page. Everyone called to congratulate him, to celebrate his vision becoming reality. But standing in the luxury penthouse that crowned the tallest building, Marcus felt like a king in an empty castle. 2 weeks before Christmas, Catherine called. Her voice was different, resolved, determined. She was coming back to New York, but only to pack up the rest of her things. The Portland Gallery had offered her a permanent position as curator. She had found an apartment, made friends, built a life. She spoke carefully as if delivering a business presentation, outlining the practical details of separating their intertwined lives. "We need to talk in person," Marcus said, hearing desperation creep into his voice. "Please, Catherine. We owe each other that much." She agreed to meet him at the coffee shop where it all began. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. Marcus arrived early, ordering black coffee from a barista he didn't recognize. Catherine's friend Sarah now managed the shop and gave him a look that made it clear what she thought of him. When Catherine walked in, Marcus felt his heart stop. She looked different, more confident, more herself. The Portland rain had brought out natural waves in her hair, and she wore paint-spattered jeans with an artist's casual elegance. She was more beautiful than ever, but in a way that had nothing to do with him. They sat at the same corner table where they had shared their first real conversation. The coffee grew cold between them as they attempted small talk. Catherine told him about Portland, about the artists she had met, the community she had found. Marcus updated her on his business, the new projects, the expansion plans. They were talking past each other, using words to avoid saying what needed to be said. Finally, Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped canvas. "I painted this for you," she said quietly. "I want you to have it." Marcus unwrapped it carefully. It was a painting of the coffee shop, but from the outside looking in. Through the rain-streaked window, 2 figures could be seen at a corner table, leaning toward each other, lost in conversation. It was them, captured in that perfect moment before everything became complicated. "I loved you," Catherine said, her voice breaking slightly. "I need you to know that. I loved you more than I thought possible. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being Marcus and Catherine. We became the king and his inappropriate girlfriend, the artist and her meal ticket. We lost ourselves trying to fit into each other's worlds." Marcus wanted to argue, to tell her they could find their way back, but the words died in his throat. Because she was right. They had both changed, twisted themselves into shapes that didn't fit, trying to force a connection that had once been effortless. "I bought a ring," he said suddenly, the confession tumbling out. 3 months ago. I was waiting for the right time, after the deal closed, after things calmed down. I kept waiting for perfect while our actual life fell apart. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't reach for his hand. That, more than anything, told Marcus what he needed to know. The woman who had once lit up at his touch now sat carefully apart, protecting herself from the pain of connection. "We could have been happy," she whispered, "if we had just stayed ourselves." They sat in silence, both remembering the couple they had been, laughing over shared jokes, discovering each other's worlds with wonder, believing love could conquer any difference. Those people seemed like strangers now, characters in someone else's love story. Marcus made one last desperate attempt. "Stay," he said, his voice raw. "Please, Catherine, we can fix this. I'll change. I'll be better. I'll be who you need me to be." Catherine shook her head sadly. "That's the problem, Marcus. I don't want you to be who I need you to be. I wanted you to be who you were, and I wanted to be who I was. But we got lost trying to be what we thought the other person wanted." She stood up, gathering her coat. Marcus remained frozen, watching their last chance slip away. At the door, Catherine turned back. Their eyes met across the coffee shop, across the chasm that had grown between them. "Be happy," she said simply. "You deserve that." Marcus found his voice, calling out in desperation as she pushed open the door. "Catherine, wait, please. We can't end like this. Not us. Not after everything." She paused, one foot already outside, rain beginning to fall like it had on the day they met. When she turned back, her face was composed, but tears tracked down her cheeks. In that moment, she was every woman who had ever loved deeply and lost, every person who had to choose between love and self. "It's over," Catherine whispered, the words barely audible above the rain. But Marcus heard them, felt them pierce through him like shards of glass. "It's been over for a while. We were just too in love to see it." She left then, walking into the rain without looking back. Marcus sat alone in the coffee shop, staring at the painting she had left behind. The barista eventually had to ask him to leave at closing time. He walked through the city streets, ending up at his waterfront development, staring up at the monument to his success. In his penthouse, Marcus placed Catherine's painting on the mantel. He poured himself a drink and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Catherine was packing her life into boxes, preparing to start over in Portland. He thought about flying there, making a grand gesture like in the movies. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life, where sometimes love wasn't enough, where two good people could love each other and still be wrong for each other. Over the following months, Marcus threw himself into work with renewed intensity, but it felt different now. He was building to fill a void, not to create something meaningful. His mother visited again, bringing photos of suitable women from their community. He listened politely but made no calls. His heart wasn't ready to let go of an artist with paint-stained fingers and dreams too big for his world. Catherine thrived in Portland. Her curator position led to opportunities she had never imagined. She dated occasionally but found herself comparing every man to a memory. On rainy mornings, she avoided coffee shops, the smell of espresso too painful a reminder. The portrait of Marcus sold to a collector who said it captured perfectly the vulnerability of love. Catherine almost didn't let it go, but realized holding on to it would mean holding on to the past. A year later, Marcus saw the announcement online. Catherine Williams had been named director of the Portland Contemporary Art Center. The photo showed her smiling, confident, surrounded by art and artists. She looked like herself, fully realized and radiant. Marcus stared at the photo for a long time before closing his laptop and walking to his window. The city stretched out below him, his kingdom built of glass and steel. He was the king of his domain, just as everyone had always called him. But kings, he had learned, could be the loneliest men in the world. Somewhere across the country, Catherine was building her own kingdom, one of color and creativity and authentic expression. They had loved each other truly and deeply. But sometimes the greatest love stories were the ones that taught you who you were meant to be, even if that meant being apart. Marcus raised his glass to the window, a silent toast to the woman who had shown him how to see beauty in the world, even if he couldn't hold on to her. The rain began to fall, and Marcus closed his eyes, remembering a morning in a coffee shop when anything seemed possible. "It's over," Catherine had whispered, and it was. But what they had shared, the ways they had changed each other, the love that had burned so bright it had to burn out, that would never truly end. It would live forever in a painting of two people falling in love, captured in a moment before they knew that sometimes love wasn't enough, that sometimes letting go was the greatest act of love of all.